Hello and good evening. I'm Justin Emmanuel P. Tabao, the presenter and writer of the study entitled Workflow Perceptions in the VFX Industry, Maya, Blender, Cinema 4D, or alternatively, in jest, my respondents upset me and there is nothing I can do about it. Apologies if my voice is rather weak. I have been rather ill for over 10 days now. So let's just discuss a short background on the industry. So the VFX industry encompasses everything that you can see that doesn't come out of a camera lens or a paintbrush. It's a very large interdisciplinary field, although the poster children would probably be animation and modeling. Those are the ones that you would associate more with software such as Maya, Blender, and Cinema 4D. All of these are solutions devised as early as the 90s for growing industry needs. So we will be examining them in the context of user workflow perceptions. So motivation. Again, software was initially conceptualized for industry demands. There wasn't really much thought put into usability. In fact, usability in this context wasn't really defined yet. It would be, if I am not mistaken, 2008 where specific models on activity-centered design would come about. This was not a thing when these softwares were being created, so it's something that we should explore retroactively now. Again, minimal literature concerning usability of complex software solutions. I'd like to emphasize complex here because the standard scales like system usability, they are rather lacking for solutions that require focused study and a lot of man hours put into learning them, especially when they are devised for very specific use cases, not for the average consumer. Consequently, a lack of bridging exists between cognitive ergonomics as a field and specialty software design. Software design doesn't really consider these factors as much as far as usability is concerned. Literature is again very lacking. And lastly, I am a hobbyist animator. Now, on to the methods. Fuzzy analytic hierarchy process. This is similar to your standard analytical hierarchy process pioneered by Thomas Sati in 1980, except this uses fuzzy set theory to generate fuzzy triangular numbers, so it's a three number set, which allows us to model the ambiguity and consequent inconsistency of respondents. In this case, a response could be seen as taking on a range of values rather than just a single discrete number. For a more rigorous discussion, I will nominate this text by uh, Nejad and Ho. I have used this to devise the methods. So, for devising the hierarchy, it's just a standard AHP scheme. The math is a bit divergent, but the structure is the same. So we have workflow perception at the top. This is the goal. We are trying to define it in terms of the lower factors. So I'd like to stay on this slide for a while. We have short-term learning, long-term learning, and software performance. Now, short and long-term learning, this is from a study by Grossman. This one was actually for Autodesk, an Autodesk product, the same company that currently maintains Autodesk Maya. So, short-term learning is more focused on factors that predate or correlate with immediate usability, learnability really. So, when users are exposed to a product for the first time, a software for the first time, these factors are what come into play when it comes to defining the attainment of baseline competence. So the first factor, we have task flow and locating. This is a union of two UI-centric factors in Grossman's study. Task flow is the comprehension or the series of rote steps you need to do in a software to perform a certain task. It's where you need to click the sequence, the conceptual sequence as dictated by the interface. Locating is simply knowing where are the stuff you need to click on. So they're rather close in this regard. The next is awareness and understanding. This is more about comprehending the functions, comprehending the paradigms of the software. This is more of understanding on some level the conceptual rigor behind, say, a NURBS-based modeling application. So next we can move on to long-term learning. These are factors concerned with performance after a certain baseline has been achieved. So this is when we're starting to approach maximal performance, or rather an experienced level of usage. So this one is Grossman still. Transition time is how long it takes for one to achieve a baseline level of competence. Transition gain is the relative difference between someone who's just learned it and can somehow do basic tasks with maybe some assistance, and then an experienced user. You can see it in the quality of work, how fast they can accomplish it. It's just the gap between baseline and maximal performance. And skill retention is just how well a certain workflow can be committed to memory even if one isn't actively practicing certain functionalities or using certain features. Because in the industry, you of course will not be using all of the tools at your disposal, but it is important that you still maintain some familiarity with it. And then for the third sub criteria, you have software performance parameters. I picked three of these from a model that proposed over eight. These ones I believe are very close to what we're trying to discover here in the field of cognitive ergonomics. So robustness is just how reliable the software is. If you do something unintended, does it have dire consequences that are inordinately bad? For example, if I delete a texture, does it clear my undo history so I can't undelete it? That's actually a case for a different software. And of course, just general runtime stability. If you're doing a task, does it suddenly crash? And it's really important to consider these because cognitively speaking, if you're not able to really trust the software you're using, well, it's highly likely that it's going to affect your performance. Flexibility is just how well you can customize the software, and practical functionality is just general quality of life for intermediate level functions. And then we have the lowest level. You have Maya, Blender, and Cinema 4D. These are the softwares in question that we will be stacking up against one another. So now that we have established that I will be surveying people, this is the part where expert opinion comes in. In all seriousness, you cannot exactly trust hobbyists or semi-professionals or basically anyone you cannot personally vouch for to be making expert opinions, expert decisions on the performance of these alternatives, Maya, Blender, Cinema 4D. I am interested in their subjective depiction on the factors importance to them, but I am not too keen on hearing them out for how well these softwares deliver. So in this case, I created a group of 7 people, 3 of which I personally work with, 4 I know online, and then I utilize the nominal group technique to conduct some asynchronous round robin discussions so that they can achieve a consensus. And that is how I derive the weights for the alternatives. So I have regular users, basically anyone with some level of experience for these, I'm not mistaken, 8 factors, and then the alternatives are discussed and weighed upon by these experts. So for more discussion here, I will just suggest Parnell et al. On decision analysis. So summing up, conceptual framework, we have three VFX applications, Maya, Blender, Cinema 4D. All of them are rather established. Blender is the only non-commercial one. Then we compare it to the factors, and then we apply the fuzzy analytical hierarchy process. We discuss the results, and that we will evaluate and deliver our takeaways. So this is where the results become rather frustrating for me. Out of a sample of 38 respondents, not counting the 7 experts, we received a consistency, or rather an index of inconsistency of 0.32, when Sati's recommendation, or rather rule of thumb, is that we do not want to go above 0.10. Now, this throws a massive wrench into how we will proceed, because now the veracity of our analysis is in question if we utilize this methodology. Nonetheless, though this data may potentially be bunk, I will discuss it later, this is a valid data point worth discussing. This suggests that when you have this many factors and you want the average user to start ranking them ordinally, evaluating their pairwise importance, users actually aren't consistent. You can see here that even with the triangular sets, you will observe that many of the factors actually step over each other. If you look at their priority vectors, they're rather small. You have task 4 at 0.023, really small there, and they're all clumped up together except for robustness. So as inconsistent as the average respondent can be, you will observe that they at least are able to discern that they want robustness substantially more than the rest. And then you can see here, this is transition gain, so they care about that substantially less than robustness per this vector, but still it differentiates itself a bit more than this mass of triangles. So in order, you would really have a top 3 of robustness well into the lead, transition gain, and then lastly you have retention, but even then it's no longer that significant. If we compare the expert assessment of the attainment of the alternatives concerning these factors, you can see that the experts are much more consistent, roughly 3%. And here's the interesting part, Blender is head and shoulders above its commercial rivals. This is a very important takeaway here, because this suggests that although we cannot really be confident with discussing the minute detail here due to the extreme inconsistency, we can conclude that when it comes to robustness and this other heavyweight factors compared to the rest, Blender is seen as better by the experts. Oh, this is interesting for me because I have had my misgivings with Maya. Maya is a prototypical example of very heavy menus, not so much memorization in terms of hotkeys, and it's currently rated lowest. The opposite is true for Blender. Blender is very heavy in memorization, everything has a hotkey. It's very, I would say, as one expert put it, intimidating for newcomers, but they claim that it is much better an alternative. So now let's go to the further implications and recommendations. Open source software fared better against commercial offerings. That much is true. And then focus group discussion and moderated conference is needed to improve data quality. This is a very important uh, implication here, because as you can see, the users left to their own devices are very fickle indeed. Then lastly, this is the most critical conclusion, is maximal efficiency potentially more important than intuitiveness, yet it still pales against robustness. Let's just go back to this slide again to drive that point home. In this case, users barely cared about task flow. They didn't really care about short-term learnability other than awareness. Awareness, of course, is tied with comprehending what the tools are able to do. So in this case, it seems that the users and experts can at least agree that the cognitive load is not worth the cognitive load being alleviated, sorry, is not worth the additional loss in maximal efficiency. This case, Blender, again, very heavy on memorization, but its maximal performance is going to be faster than Maya, which forces you to dig through many somewhat obtuse menus that are at least easy to spot for a newcomer. But once again, the most important thing for a user is really the robustness. They want a software they can rely on, functions well, and doesn't crash. They believe, as per this data, they can handle difficult to use software. They don't really find it a particularly big pain point. They rather care about its robustness, its stability when it's being stress tested in the industry, and transition gains. When they reach a high level of competence, they want to be very efficient, even at the cost of a more difficult to acquire base competence here in task force. You can see it's rather low, high here. So again, just to reiterate, robustness is key. My respondents cannot be trusted, but fortunately the experts were able to salvage this and we were able to achieve a strong conclusion here stating that we have robustness and gain as the most important factors. Thank you.